Hi guys, welcome to my podcast. My name is Melissa Snow, and today we're going to be talking about a American haunting Thanksgiving story. So let's just jump right into it. As an Americans gather for Thanksgiving holiday, it is perhaps time to turn the clock back to one family feast that did not rise quite a much cheer. It tells a terrible incident. It took place in a house in Oakville, Georgia, USA, in later part of the 19th century. This spot had earned a high place among the haunted locations in its day and comparable with the famous house, the Berkeley Square. And forgive me if I don't know how to say certain names right, because there are names in here that I cannot pronounce. So yeah, let's just keep going. Situated in the midst of picturesque but lonely country, the house, the property of a farmer named Wallace Slingham, had a worldwide reputation among physical psychic investigations. For some time, the house had been left deserted by its owner. And it would seem that during the temporary absence of the material master, it has possessed into the hands of beings or forces, can call them what you will, who wished to remain the undisputed possession. When Walsingham, sorry, I cannot pronounce that person's name, and his family decided to return to take up their abode in the house, they were struck on the very first day of the particular feeling of the place. They could not decide in any way what the feeling was. And analysts liked to say it was claustrophobia and overpowering dread of being alone within the four walls. Their dog, Don Caesar, absolutely refused to enter the house. On being dragged in, and immediately broke out into a furious bark. This bark bursted with rage, and he showed every sign of terror. This occurred several times during the day, and the same evening even attracted to the spot to where his whines and howls, Walsingham saw his dog attack some invisible enemy. Don Caesar at last sprang into the air as if it was a man's throat, but it fell back as it had been received with a heavy blow. Oh wow. When they picked up, his neck was broken. Oh my goodness, that's so sad. The Walsingham cat, on the other hand, manifests every sign of delight of being in the house. It strolled room to room, purring loudly, and was seen on several occasions twisting its head from side to side and arching its back as if someone were stroking it. To say that Walsingham was amazed, at this things would be described their feeling mildly. They were very upset, but had not as yet any suspicion of the score of the supernatural causes. But that evening, just towards the dusk of the house was suddenly filled with a shout of groans and hideous laughter, heard by all the occupants and putting them into a veritable panic. That's what it says, a veritable panic. Miss Amelia Willingslingham was sitting in front of the mirror. So she was sitting in front of a mirror, and she saw a hand in the mirror, and she saw an arm, and it said there was no body. And she said that her husband saw footprints as they were walking, and no mortal could be seen. And that was part of that. But then all of a sudden it says, but though these things were uncanny and terrifying, were significant to make the family release the same force out of the usual was at work. They paled into insignificance before the later incident, which took place during the evening meal. The family was seated at supper. One of the two guests, when their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a loud and horrible groan uttered apparently in the room above. Little notice was taken of it until one of the guests pointed out a stain of what looked like blood on the tablecloth, and it was then seen that some liquid was slowly dripping from the ceiling overhead. The liquid was so much like freshly shed blood, it was horrifying, and those witnessed it was slowly dripping. It would be hard to imagine and more gruesome occurrence at the time, but the particular form of horror and theatrical way in which it carried out would put down as the invention of some most modest but detectively clever person. In flashing into minds all of the sitting at the table, that seemed terrible deed had been committed. In the room above, some frightful murder. For a few seconds, all sat silent with white faces looking out of the corner of their eyes, and each of their face had terror on it. Then Walsingham shook it off, his paralysis of fear, and ran out of the room, followed by his son. They went quickly upstairs to the room over the dining room and flung open the door. What fearful sight their eyes should meet, but it was empty. They tore up the carpet, and they found that the boards, to be soaked with the same red, gruesome liquid, was dripping into the room beneath. But then there was no expectation, nor was afterward discovered. The liquid was later examined under the microscope by a medical examiner and pronounced to be human blood. That's crazy. The incident was too much for Walsingham, and they left the house and removed to another house. Walsingham's house then fell into disarray, and stories of the occurring began putting about occurrence being put aboard. The place was shunned by day and as well as night. This neglect did not tend to make Spot look more cheerful, and in the state that additional to the gloom and generally settled on the most ordinary of empty houses. There was an undoubtable feeling of depression in the air around the place. Quite normal people said that it felt like to them as if it was an atmosphere and logically weighed more than everyone else. The house had not been approached for several months when the young man named Horace Gunn made it to a subject. The house has not been approached for at least 7 months when a young man, Horace Gunn, made it a subject of a wager betting of a friend a fair sum of money that he would stay alone in the house for one night and then no aid with on no calls and just alone. This enthusiastic young man carried about the intentions and went into the house one evening before it was dark, and his story is the best told with his own words. I had been in the house about an hour and nothing happened. It was just beginning to be dark, and I thought I would set about lighting a fire. Thought I'd do so, consider myself an expert of the art. I was just very much surprised at being absolutely unable to do so. My matches went out one after another. As if they were blown out by a strong drought. Once, when I had succeeded in lighting a piece of paper, it only smoldered for a few seconds and then went out. This was bad enough, as I had to keep up the idea of cheerful blaze to keep me company. But to my disgust, I found that my lamp would not light either. And nothing's lighting up. It was as if it were filled with water instead of oil. It was now quite dark, and while I was looking about for some means of getting a light, there came a terrible yell of pain from underneath the house. And this was the site of an outbreak of most hideous and devilish noise. There was a shout, screams, groans, laughter, thumping, and continual running up and down the stairs as several heavy-shod people. My hair bristled. I stood by the window, practically paralyzed with fear. And had I then been able to control my limbs, I would have fled from the house. I would have lost my wager and hundred like it rather than stay in the haunted of friends. Then suddenly the noises stopped. Complete silence fell on the place. But far from reassuring me, they made matters worse, for now I dreaded this silence even more than I had the ghostly noises. All the time I listened, and several times I listened. Now then I thought I heard soft footsteps drawing near me, but then it was nothing. This waiting and dreading was so far worse than the pandemous of terror. I did not have long to wait for the next move. For the darkness, there suddenly appeared a small spot of greenish light on the wall opposite of me. It grew larger and larger, altering into shape until it assumed the outline of a human head, at the same time losing its flatness. Soon it was a real head floating in the air. Its hair was long and gray and matted together, and it kept a deep, jagged cut on the temple. The whole face indicated suffering and misery. The eyes were wide open and gleamed with unfearly fire. While they seemed to direct the gaze upon me, the head moved about the room, but always the eyes were turned to my direction. Then it vanished. But there broke out in a room a loud and awe-inspiring wail, as if several souls in anguish. I thought then that I could see indistinct shape floating above, and then mustering up all my courage, I attempted to pass them and gain into the door. But as soon as I reached it, I felt an ankle sized in a firm grasp, and the down and felt fingers grasping on my throat. At this point, Miss Gunn's story ceases. At this point, Mr. Gunn's story ceases. He was found by his friends the next morning, unconscious on the floor by the door, and being out of the throat, the marks of a long, thin fingers with cruel, caved nails. After the experience, no one was found to have any more to do with the house, though a few people instead in such matters attempted to find out some reason for the terrible haunting. Though several avenues of investigations were explored, nothing very conclusive was discovered. The house had, by the time, inadequate such an evil reputation that no one would ever occupy it, and it was ultimately demolished. They shouldn't have demolished it. Many human bones were found under it and in the grounds. How they came there was never known, but it was supposed to that they had lain there for many years, and were the bones of people who might have been murdered when the house was roadside inn and very bad reputation. And herein perhaps lies the expectation for a haunting at the house a few days before. Returning to the house, Miss Walsingham, sorry, cannot pronounce that, have discovered in the grounds were some old dried bones, and not able to decide whether they were human or not, settled to the matter as he thought by ordering them to be thrown into a lime kiln. It is possible that the spirits of the men whose bones were thus to indeed treated summoned to their aid certain dark forces in order to make the place uninhabited by mortal and revenge for the insult of offering the remains. That was that story. All right, and that was that story. That was kind of creepy, but I don't know what the house's name was because they never said. But it was a true story, and I just want to let everybody thank you for enjoying my podcast and being here and listening to it and watching it and liking it and saying hello in the comments would be awesome. And I do go live, just so you know. Don't forget that. And I do go to haunted locations. That is the end of my story. I just want to say I hope everyone stays safe and has a great day. And I just want to say thank you for enjoying my podcast. Peace out, everyone. Bye.